Continuing reading my 2020 Action, Criticism, and Theory for Music Education article, An Environmental Philosophy for Music Education based on Satis Coleman's writings on music and nature. We're on page 183, Nature's Pedagogical Inspiration. Coleman used her idea as an inspiration for activities in her approach to teaching music. For her, improvisational elements emerged in natural processes, and nature was an inspiration for musical exploration and learning. As an example, Coleman, in 1926, opened her book, First Steps in Playing and Composing, with a story that students were to follow as they experimented with glasses filled with water previously tuned by the teacher. And here's a big long quote from pages 2 and 3. One day, Harry, Jane, and William had a party and ate ice cream sitting beside a table on the lawn under the big oak. The ice cream was finished. There was left on the table only 3 glasses of water. The children drank what they wanted. Then a funny thing happened. An acorn dropped from a tree to the table and struck one of the glasses. It made a clear, ringing sound. The children looked at one another. Harry tapped the glass with his fingernail and heard the ringing sound again, much softer. If you tap glass number 3, you will hear the same kind of sound that Harry heard. Jane took a small stick from the ground and tapped her glass. It also made a ringing sound, but it was different. Tap number 1 and see the difference. Oh, listen, said William. Tap those 2 glasses again. They sound like something I have heard in the woods. Play 3, then 1, and repeat them several times, and see if you could tell, as quickly as Jane did, the name of the bird that sings that kind of song. If you have not heard a real cuckoo, perhaps you have heard the little bird that sings cuckoo on a cuckoo clock. End quote. In this example, as nature inspired the approach to learning music, the acorn falling on an empty glass, and then the music reflected back to nature. The student learned something of nature, the cuckoo's birdsong. A contemporary teacher utilizing this approach might provide a type of ecological and ethical experience, especially if the activity leads to a discussion of species or migration patterns or other ecological challenges. For instance, climate change seems to have led to increased Eurasian cuckoo populations in Alaska, threatening native bird species unprepared for the cuckoo's brooding habits. Okay, so that's that section. And I think this is brilliant, right? 1920s. And this is the composition book, right? How to use composition as a pedagogical tool in your classes. I know a lot of times when I read articles in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even today, right? People think that composition is a brand new pedagogical tool that nobody's ever used in past years, right? And then even when I write my stuff on ecology, sometimes I can fail to just understand just how ecological the past was, right? So coming back to understand the cuckoo, right, or at least a cuckoo clock. Now knowing the challenges we face today, which are so much different than they were 100 years ago, right? This is 26, so 99 years ago when this book was published. You know, we can turn it back on nature or musical knowledge even better, right? It's like a reciprocal relationship. Nature to creative musicking, creative musicking back to nature. Okay, continuing on. Consumption and conservation. Long before European explorers began arriving in North America, Turtle Island, a Lenape name for the continent used by many indigenous groups, was home to many ecologically conscious peoples who developed diverse ways of living sustainably within natural limits. See Robin Wall Kimmerer's 2013 book. While colonial settler culture has, in many respects, been environmentally destructive, It is also included in environmental philosophy, critique, and ethics. Likely due to its expansive geography, the founding gardeners, according to Wolf's famous book, established the United States of America, which in turn became the birthplace for the nature reserve. Before the 20th century, the conservation movement emerged. Yellowstone National Park was established in 1872, Sequoia and Yosemite in 1890, Mount Rainier in 1899. The first half of the 20th century, which was when Coleman taught, was an important time for conservation in the United States. The 20th century began with the great conservationist president, Theodore Roosevelt. Like many in his era, Charles Darwin's evolutionary theory was a strong influence on Roosevelt. Before becoming U.S. president, he was well known for creating wilderness preserves and the Bronx Zoo. During his presidency, Roosevelt established 230 million acres as public lands, 250 million acres as national forests. He established national parks at Crater Lake, Wind Cave, and Mesa Verde, in addition to saving Yellowstone through the Park Protection Act. Conservation continued as a dominant American ethic through the first half of the 20th century, mostly in response to the observable ecological crises initiated by industrial development. The largest ever forest fire in America occurred in the United States in Idaho, Montana, and Washington in 1910. The links between ecology and economics were strengthened in the emblematic ecological disaster of the 1930s, the Dust Bowl. There was an active conservation movement during Coleman's formative years, and it is possible that the conservation movement affected her music education philosophy. An ecological consciousness, or imagination, has typically been the central part of American thought, according to Buell. And there's no reason for music education philosophy to be any different. Coleman's writings exemplify ecological ideas in music education. Most music education philosophy eludes questions of the natural environment, and such has ignored Coleman's contribution. In recent years, women scholars have led the charge for a more environmentally informed discourse in music education. Jorgensen, Koza, Morton. Morton wrote in 2012, "For music educators, teaching to any element of social and ecological problems will, I believe, increasingly generate respect for the merit, the potential, and indeed the necessity of pursuing these cross-curricular moral imperatives." End quote. Presaging this direction, Coleman in 1922 saw music education as part of a broad education. Quote, "All that we do for our children is in some way or other meant to enrich their lives and prepare them for the experiences which life has in store for them. The most of us feel that music training comes in for a share of that preparation." End quote. So music education is part of the overall learning, not the central part for most of our kids. Okay, continuing. Koza suggested music educators could create goals that are, quote, antithetical to corporate goals, end quote, goals that are waste-free and environmentally sustainable. She uses that word, sustainable. That's her 2008 article, I think. Coleman employed instrument making in her teaching for several reasons, and it is unlikely that an interest in addressing the waste crisis is among them. Waste, however, has become a critical concern for the 21st century. Musical instrument industries use wood originating in the global south, negatively affecting the environment. See LaFontant, Deniskia's 2017 and 2019 articles. Contemporary music groups, such as Landfill Philharmonic, use instrument making to address waste. The Landfill Philharmonic also serves to hold a mirror to the global north, where most waste is produced. Classical music instruments are not the only tools that result in destroyed ecosystems and create waste. New technologies often have obsolescence built into them. New iPads and computers come out every year and quickly become outdated. Innovation in industrial society is often waste producing. According to Vincent Bates' article on Sustainability 2013, quote, waste compounded many times over by reinforcing in the minds of children the unquestioned goodness and necessity of technological innovation, end quote. Whether for innovative rock and hip-hop ensembles or maintaining school bands and orchestras, the instrument industry is perhaps unsustainable. Coleman initially had students make instruments because industry had not yet manufactured non-Western instruments. She later discovered the creative potential instrument making had for joyful music education. And here's a long quote from her 1927 book. Many years ago, in the beginning of my experiments with simple instruments, there was practically none to be had. So the children and I attempted to make some. And thus, from necessity, we were driven headlong into the application of an educational principle and the discovery of how it worked. Great joy attended their experiments, and as in a vision, a complete picture flashed before me. The children shall build up their own art and experience the development of music from the beginning. I said to myself, I shall find the child's own level and lift him gradually to higher levels, with the natural evolution of music as my guide in the leading the children from the simple to the complex. Primitive man made his own instruments, and so shall they make theirs, end quote. Now I have these long quotes in here, but they're very important for making the point, right? Okay, continuing on. We're on page 187, if you lost track. It may be that singing, repurposing trash as classroom instruments, and simple instrument making represents better, waste-free, and anti-industrial options. Koza 2006 illuminated, quote, I am asserting that rather than slavishly supporting consumption and depletion, musicking can foster jouissance. Sorry for my French. I don't have any French. I took Spanish for 2 years in high school. And also, in a metaphorical sense, replenish and revivify itself. That this can be done non-consumptively is good news for people and for the environment. Perhaps it is not such good news for business, for the corporate world that survives by selling tubas, CDs, textbooks, composition, software, and electronic keyboards, end quote. There are certainly links between Coleman's conception of joy and Koza's jouissance. Coleman, 1925, emphasized friendship. Quote, the greatest value is not to be found in a concert hall or in any public space where people of great talent play. Its greatest value is found at home and in ensemble playing with friends together. Furthermore, playful singing, dancing, and instrument construction seem the most ecologically sustainable practices available to contemporary music teachers. See also Bates 2013 and Matsunobu 2013. Having students make instruments takes time. However, much of schooling is about efficiency. In this era of neoliberal capitalism, the logic of efficiency as capitalist competition is extended to all areas of social life. The object is to establish rules of the game that prevent any deviation from the logic of commodity exchange or capitalist competition, while extending these relations further into society with the state as the ultimate guarantor of market supremacy. Efficiency is not only a factual part of schooling in a capitalist society, and perhaps a reason why music education discarded Coleman's popular approach after she retired. Efficiency is problematic. Addressing ecological crises requires time for thinking about the past and present and ruminating about possible sustainable futures. Keeping students on task can leave Little time for reflection. None of this can be afforded by teacher-centered efficient teaching approaches, not to mention student-centered approaches embedded in efficiency rationales, providing time for making instruments, experimenting on them, and even being outdoors, listening to non-human musicians in our soundscapes are radical acts that may not be welcome in a capitalist schooling today. Job training requires children to learn efficiency, even if spiritually, psychologically, and socially destructive. Undirected time, however, is something music teachers must provide to begin living a little more sustainably, less like unconscious consumers and more like responsible citizens. Music educators may be the only teachers left in schools without policymakers staring down their backs, with ever more efficient scripts and high-stake tests. Music teachers' insider-outsider status in schools, for instance as specials, may open space for them to act in inefficient, ecologically sustaining ways. We'll stop right there on page 188 and continue with epistemology, ethics, and policy. And thank you for paying attention to my long work, right? This is like a dissertation itself. I often consider it my third dissertation, this particular research into Satis Coleman. I began it before my first dissertation and even published a Music Educators Journal article, a short one, on Satis Coleman, as this information on her and her environmental philosophy emerged, right? I was calling it a spiritual philosophy at that point. And then continued on with my dissertation in confident music improvising, and then did my second dissertation right after it just on ecoliteracy, just because our field needed a big, serious ecological statement that was holistic, right? Which is what it got in that 2017 book. And then this 2020 was me finishing up my third dissertation. It's like having 3 dissertations, all of which are very full, very robust, right? It's a wonderful thing, but man, this was a lot of work getting this done. Even my second book was not as much work as this was, right? Even though it's an article, luckily ACT has the opportunity to publish really long articles, right? And we're not even halfway, I don't think. Okay, have a great day.